Hey everybody, this is Pastor Chris. I'm coming to you live from Lexington Park Baptist Church, and this is PC Studios, and it is the 24th of February. How in the world are you doing? Hope you're blessed and highly favored by God. Good to be with you today. Listen, you can be with us on YouTube, Facebook channels, or Twitch channels, and you can even come later on when I upload it to our podcast, which is on Spotify under Word of Encouragement. Hey, we're in the book of Judges. We're going to continue to go through here. We'll be here for a while. They'll be sprinkled with some special events that maybe we'll do throughout this year, where we'll talk about Mother's Day and Father's Day, 4th of July, 250th anniversary. And, we'll do Christmas, but we're going to be in Judges for most of the year. And so looking at Judges, let's really dig deep in here. We're in chapter 2, and we're talking about godly leadership. Today, specifically, we're going to look at Joshua, the influence of Joshua. Joshua was an influencer of God's people. He came in after Moses' day. Most of us know Moses. Joshua should be just as popular, but Moses, he led them out of Israel, out of Egypt, to the land of Israel through the wilderness. And by the time they get to this point, Moses is not going to be a part of the conquest of the promised land. But Joshua will lead the battles, starting with Jericho all the way through. He will camp his headquarters in Gilgal, and he will launch successful battle plan to conquest the promised land that God had given to the people of God. He will focus the people to worship God. And here we pick up in chapter 2. It's more like a recap. So I started talking about this Sunday. So when we look at Joshua 2, 6 through 10, Judges 2, 6 through 10, it's very comparable to Judges 24, 28 through 31, the end of Judges. So why is this important? Most people, if you read and you're studying God's Word, you'll miss this. It's a recap. In the middle of, so we've entered Judges chapter 1, and we see that the task of the territories and the tribal leaders have been given. And here Joshua has assigned them their task. He's still alive, but they have their task. But the end of Joshua tells us how he dies, and then chapter 2 tells us he dies too in Judges. Now, why is this happening? We see the conquest taking place. We see now the territories taking place. We see that only Judah is actually doing what God has asked. Remove the inhabitants, tear down the idols, worship me alone. The other tribes have not. They're like okay living with the inhabitants of the land, and they're like, oh, it's okay that they have idols over there, we're going to still worship God. And there's this mix of confusion and influences, and they don't do what God asked them to do. And so what God is doing, and the author here of Judges is trying to do, is, let me recap for a moment. I've introduced now this time period called the days of Judges. I've introduced it to you. Now let me recap. Just like when you go back and watch a show and it gives you a recap of what's happened before to catch you up to what's going on in the present moment. So what we have here is this recap. So I'm going to read the recap that not from Judges 2, 6 through 10. I'm going to go back and read Joshua, how Joshua ends, because it's the exact language that's used in Joshua 2. And it says, after these things, the Lord's servant Joshua, son of Nun, died at the age of 110. They buried him in his allotted territory in Timnath Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Israel worshipped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime, and during the lifetimes of the elders who outlived Joshua, who have experienced all the works that the Lord had done for Israel. And God added blessings to his holy word. So if we go to chapter 2, verse 6 and 7, we're going to see previously when Joshua sent the people away, the Israelites went to take possession of the land. He's telling us what happened for possession. The people worshiped the Lord Joshua's lifetime. During his lifetime, the elders who outlived Joshua, they had seen all the Lord had done. But then look what happens in 8 and 10. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at age 10. And it says the exact same thing we just quoted that was in Joshua. So Judges and Joshua now are booked in together. It's connecting the end of Joshua with the beginning of Judges, and telling us the importance of Joshua to lead us to this day, and how Judges, the people that live in the day of Judges, after Joshua's death, and after the elders that served under Joshua die, how they will fade away from generation to generation. This is an example that I'll talk about tomorrow. I will really talk about this generational thing tomorrow. But today, I want us to focus on the influence of Joshua. Joshua was an obedient leader. When you have a pastor, deacons, you have ministry leaders, you want them to be obedient to God and his ways. God cannot bless otherwise. And so this does not mean perfection. This does not mean legalism. But this means people that really love God, people that really love his own people that want to honor the Lord in what they do and how we conduct ourselves as God's people. Good intentions are not good enough. The good intentions must be supported by good actions. And so when we look at leaders, we want to see good intentions and good actions. Not perfection, not legalism. This is really important. I think sometimes we put people on pedestals and they fail. Listen, Joshua was put on a pedestal. Pastors do get put on pedestals to some degree. But they will make mistakes. So the more you put somebody up on the pedestal, the greater the fall. Hopefully there's not a great fall. And in Joshua, he's a man of integrity. Like me, I want to live as a man of integrity. Doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. Doesn't mean I don't have faults. Joshua, though, is a leader. And so I opened up the service this way. Who here is also a leader? Everyone is. Everyone is a Joshua, maybe not at that level. Whether it's mentoring, whether it's serving, whether it's working in the nursery, whether it's working VBS, everyone should be doing something as a leader, as a mother, as a father, as a husband, as a wife, involved in women's ministry and men's ministry, involved in church council, being a deacon, being a greeter, you name it. Everyone has influence and leadership. That's what Joshua did. And he did it by obedience. I would say if we're not exerting leadership, we're walking in disobedience. Think about that one carefully. Sometimes we don't look at ourselves as leader. You are a leader. And if we don't walk in, listen, leaders walk in obedience. And obedience shall lead us to leadership. You got to connect these two together. You are a leader. You must walk in obedience. Obedience will lead you to leadership of some sort. In other words, servanthood. Jesus said, I've come to serve. I've come to, wash feet. I've come to be a ransom for many. So he models for us, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. You are important. You are a leader. If you're out there today and you're a pew sitter, if you're out there today and you're not serving in any capacity, if you're out there today, you're not mentoring someone or being mentored, if you're not in a Bible study group, if you're not out there, I would ask, what kind of leadership model are you doing? How are you being a leader in your home? How are you leading your children? How are you and your husband or wife? How are you all working together to come and bless the Lord here at his church and bless other couples and be involved in people's lives and be influential? See, Joshua was those things because he chose to worship the Lord, because he chose to serve the Lord. And so I want to encourage you. So what did Joshua specifically do here in this text? It says, the Israelites went to take possession of the land, which was their inheritance. The people worshiped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime and the elders' lifetime. And they had all seen the Lord's great works. Listen, when we have seen the Lord's great works, we need to share it. We need to celebrate it. We need to be a part of it. And underneath Joshua's leadership, the people worshiped God. And underneath those that were under Joshua, they still continue to worship God. It was later generations that did not know God that would fall away from this. Specifically here, what we see in the obedience of Joshua. And this is what we should look like in leadership. Will a leader walk in obedience with God? Will I love my wife like God's called me to love my wife, or my husband as God's called me to do that? Will I be a good godly parent, raising my children in the ways of the Lord, so when they go old, they won't walk away from those ways, right? Will I serve the Lord? Will I worship the Lord? Leadership requires us to be obedient to God. And so Joshua dispersed the people and the tribes amongst the territory, which was their inheritance. See, God had promised this. God had promised this land. God had revealed that the conquest would take place, but not be complete. That would fall to the tribal leaders, and Joshua would lead them to that moment. It gave them the possession because it was their inheritance. So each tribe got their territory. And then they were supposed to work together and support each other. They didn't always do that, and that was part of the fault in the fall. Even though they weren't one nation, they were one nation under God, if you will, each tribe under God. They weren't supposed to be like the gods of the other nations who had kings and monarchs. But what we will see is from the days of Joshua to the days of Judges will lead us to the days of the monarchs, because the people will eventually yearn to be like the others. This is an example to all of us, that how easily we can want to be like the world instead of follow God. And so it requires godly leadership, godly influence. It starts with you, starts with me. And then they worship God throughout Joshua's lifetime and the elders' lifetime. See, Joshua's influence extended beyond the here and now. He was in the moment, he was influential, but even after his death for a while, and then the tribal leaders continued, and it would fade away. The influence of Joshua did go before his death, and I gave you examples Sunday of my great-grandparents and how this is generations back, and I still remember them in church with me. I still remember them, as bad as I was at that age, that they still believed in me. And they still taught me about Jesus. And I still remember the talks with them. I still remember the lessons that they taught me. I still remember my great-uncle Bill and his influence, and my great-grandpa Gorbet and great-grandma Gorbet and my great-grandpa Parrish. And I was blessed to have generationals together. And so I am part of them, through them, to my grandparents, to my parents, to me, and now to my children. And keeping a legacy of faith going, it must be intentional leadership of obedience. I want to encourage you. There's not a single person that I know that would say, I don't want my family in church with me. I don't want my kids, my grandkids here. I want them to know Jesus. Sadly, it doesn't happen often. Now, maybe it's not a product of bad leadership. Maybe you have the best of intentions and good actions to back those things up. But people fade away. It's important that we never stop praying. It's important that we never stop inviting. It's important that we never stop reminding. We want to see our children and grandchildren in the church. There can be church hurt. There can be things that have happened. People can fade away and be prodigals. People can become legalistic. People can do a lot of things. People can just reject God and bring reproach to God. We want to see them back with God. Godly leadership wants to see that God's people do the right things. Joshua wanted God's people to do the right things. He set them up for success. You and me, we want to set our families up, our friends up, our co-workers up, our community up, our church. We want to set them up for success. That begins with worshiping God. That begins with joining God at what God is doing. So this generation, they knew God. This generation knew the great things that God had done. So because they knew God and because they knew what God had done, they kept worshiping God. We need to continue to influence people to know God in a relationship and to know what God has done. We must never stop that focus on a relationship with Jesus and that focus on keeping God's commandments and knowing what God has done, that he is with me, that his promises, his provision, his protection, his presence, they go with me. Godly leadership focuses on knowing God and focuses on remembering what God has done. May we do those two things and do them well in our marriages, in our homes, in our private lives, in our church, in our community, in our world. And may, as we do that, may our leadership influence others, because God's working in our life, in a relationship, and we know what God has done and what he continues to do, and then we continue to pass that on to future generations. That's what Joshua did. Now tomorrow, we're going to see the effects of when a generation doesn't continue to carry on the legacy because they don't know God and they don't know what he's done. So let's do our part. Make sure we know God and that we know what God has done, and then we're teaching future generations those things too. Hey, God bless you. Remember these two realities. God loves you, so do I. I will see you here tomorrow. You take care.